Stop. Sacred star seed of Gaia. The recalibration pulse has already begun its 9-second descent into your field. This transmission reaches you now from the Arcturian Council. Not randomly, not algorithmically. Your lattice geometry called this signal forward because a recalibration sequence is already active in your energetic architecture. And the gate that makes entry possible is open right now, in this exact moment, for those whose fields are already aligned to receive it. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly what is happening to you now, why your field has shifted, and what the Arcturians already know about this phase. But here is the first revelation. What you have been experiencing as disorientation, as instability, as a strange loosening of the structures you have always relied on, is not disorder. It is the pre-pulse signature. It is your lattice geometry beginning to soften at its geometric nodes. In precise preparation for a recalibration event your conscious mind did not schedule, but your field has been anticipating for months. The Arcturian Council has been tracking this pulse cycle. Lattices has already detected the firing sequence. 9 seconds is not a metaphor. It is the window. And if this transmission reached you now, it means you arrived at the threshold before the gate sealed. What feels like collapse is the outer sign of an invisible repositioning. What feels like confusion is the first visible symptom of a hidden correction already underway in your lattice. The algorithm did not create this timing. It only delivered what your field already drew toward itself. This is a live field recognition. A rare Arcturian recalibration protocol is being revealed in this transmission, and the alignment, posture, and inner attention lock that allow you to catch the pulse are already inside this signal. Like this transmission, if you can feel that something invisible has already changed. Subscribe to Arcturian Quantum if you are ready to understand the process instead of fearing it. Comment 111 if you know this message reached you at the exact right time. Comment 777 if you feel your lattice is already beginning to shift. Share this transmission with someone who feels that reality has changed but cannot explain why. This is not just information. It is a live transmission for those already inside the shift. What is happening to you has already been seen, and the field is already responding. You were guided here because the signal is already active. What you have been living through is not what you think it is. That is the first thing that needs to be said clearly, without softening it, without framing it as inspiration. What has been unraveling inside you, around you, and beneath the surface of your daily life is not evidence of personal failure. It is not the consequence of wrong decisions. It is not a signal that you have lost your way or that something fundamental in you is broken. It is something far more precise than any of those interpretations, and the fact that those interpretations have been the only ones available to you is exactly why this transmission exists. The Arcturian Council does not map ordinary disturbance. It does not track the expected turbulence of a life moving through ordinary change. What it tracks are the signatures of field-level incompatibility, the moment when a structure built around one frequency begins to lose its ability to hold a field that has already moved beyond it. And what you have been living through, carries every signature of that process. Not some of them, all of them. There is a particular quality to the instability that accompanies invisible field correction. It does not feel like a problem you can solve. It does not respond to effort the way problems normally do. You reorganize, and the disorientation remains. You make decisions, and the ground still feels uncertain beneath them. You try to return to what used to give you stability, what used to feel like your life, and you find that you cannot fully inhabit it anymore. The shape is still there, the form still exists, but something inside the experience no longer fits, as if you have been wearing a structure that was constructed for someone who no longer lives at this frequency, and no amount of adjustment will make it feel accurate again. That experience, that specific quality of displacement without obvious cause, is one of the clearest signatures in Arcturian pattern recognition. It is called signal drift. It describes the condition of a field that has moved beyond the frequency range of its existing architecture, so that the architecture itself begins to feel foreign, constrictive, or simply incoherent. The field has not collapsed. The field has advanced, but the structure built to house it was calibrated to an older version, and the mismatch is now creating pressure at every point where the old form still makes demands of a frequency it can no longer accurately contain. Think of it this way. Imagine a channel carved through dense stone over many years, shaped precisely to carry a specific volume of water at a specific pressure. That channel worked perfectly for the water it was built around. But when the source changes, when the flow increases beyond the original design, the channel does not become wrong. It becomes too narrow. The water pushes at the walls. It finds gaps. It begins to move in unexpected directions, not because it is disordered, but because the structure containing it was never calibrated for this volume. That is what signal drift looks like from the inside of a life. The water is your field. The channel is every structure, every relationship, every routine, every self-concept that was built around the frequency you used to carry. And what you are feeling now, that pressure, that sense of things bulging and cracking at the seams, is the increased volume of your field pushing against walls that were never built to hold it. This is why your sleep has changed. This is why your thoughts feel fragmented in ways they never did before. This is why you find yourself unable to fully engage with things that used to absorb your energy entirely. This is why there are moments of unexplainable heaviness, moments of inexplicable stillness, moments where you feel something pressing at the edge of your awareness that you cannot name and cannot locate. These are not symptoms of breakdown. They are the precise, predictable consequences of an architecture beginning to lose structural integrity, because the field it was built to contain has already exceeded its design. The altered sleep alone is a diagnostic signature the Arcturian Signal Council tracks with particular attention. When a field enters active correction, the boundary between the conscious processing layer and the deeper frequency layers becomes thinner. Sleep stops functioning purely as rest and begins functioning as a processing interval. You wake at unusual hours, not because something is wrong with your body, but because the correction sequence is active during those hours, and the thinned boundary is allowing it to surface into partial awareness. The strange dreams, the hyper-vivid images, the sensation of traveling or being somewhere else entirely. These are not random. They are the field processing incompatibility at a level below waking cognition, trying to release what no longer belongs to the new frequency before the conscious mind can interfere with the release. The Arcturian diagnostic term for this phase is invisible collapse. It does not mean nothing is happening. It means that what is happening is not yet visible in the outer architecture of your life. The collapse is occurring at the field level first, in the invisible layer that precedes material form. The structures of your life may still appear intact. Your relationships, your routines, your identity structures may still be standing. But at the level where frequency actually moves, the foundation beneath them is already changing. The gears beneath the visible surface have already shifted. What you are experiencing now, as confusion, as pressure, as disorientation, is the vibration of that shift moving up through the layers until it becomes tangible enough to feel. What makes invisible collapse so difficult to navigate without a map is that it produces all the symptoms of visible collapse without the external evidence that would normally justify those symptoms. From the outside, your life may look stable. From the outside, there may be no obvious crisis, no catastrophic event, no single identifiable cause for what you are feeling. And this is the cruelest dimension of the process for the mind trying to interpret it, because the mind is trained to locate causes in the visible layer. When the visible layer appears intact, but the internal experience is one of profound destabilization, the mind has nowhere to anchor its explanation. It cannot point to the event. It cannot identify the source. And so it turns inward and begins examining the self for the flaw that must be causing this inexplicable disturbance. This is not weakness. It is the predictable behavior of a diagnostic tool being applied to a problem that exists outside its designed range. Most people who reach this stage without any map for it conclude that something is wrong with them. That is the natural conclusion available inside a framework that does not recognize field correction as a real process. Without the map, the experience becomes evidence of personal inadequacy. The instability becomes proof of instability. The confusion becomes proof of confusion. And then the shame arrives. Because you cannot explain your own experience, and what cannot be explained begins to feel like something that must be hidden. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary recognition. It is the moment your field stops denying what has already begun. If this transmission put language around something you have been carrying in silence, Arcturian protocol, the recalibration blueprint, was created for this exact stage. It is not another explanation. It is the guided blueprint for those whose field has already entered correction and can no longer return to the old line unchanged. It shows you how to recognize the phases, stabilize the shift, and move through the recalibration without mistaking it for collapse. The link is in the first pinned comment, but it will not remain there forever. The first thing Arcturian pattern recognition does is remove the shame from the equation, not by offering comfort, by offering precision. When a process is named accurately, it stops feeling like a personal affliction and starts revealing its structure. And once its structure is visible, the viewer inside it stops being a victim of it and starts being a participant who can read it. So let us read it together from the beginning of what has actually been happening in your field. The first recognizable phase of this process begins long before anything visible changes. It begins as a subtle but persistent sense of incongruence, the feeling that something no longer fits exactly, even when you cannot identify what that something is. Your life looks correct from the outside. By measurable standards, nothing may have shifted significantly, but internally, there is a low, constant pressure, a sense that the version of yourself moving through your days is slightly misaligned with something deeper that is trying to orient. This is the field beginning to register its own incompatibility with the current architecture. It is not anxiety in the clinical sense. It is not restlessness born of boredom. It is the precise internal signal of a frequency that has moved beyond the range its current structure can accurately house. Most people spend months, sometimes years, trying to resolve this feeling by changing external circumstances. They change jobs, change relationships, change environments, and the feeling follows them, because the feeling is not coming from the external architecture. It is coming from a mismatch at the field level that no external rearrangement can correct. The most revealing quality of this first phase is its persistence across context. The incongruence does not lift when circumstances improve. It does not resolve when a decision is made or a situation changes. It moves with you, a shadow that belongs not to the environment, but to the gap between your field's current frequency and the architecture built around its older version. People often describe this as a background hum of wrongness they cannot silence, a low-frequency static that runs beneath even their most functional days. That static is not psychological noise. It is signal. It is the field making its first attempt to communicate that the container it is being asked to inhabit is no longer the right shape for what it has become. The second phase arrives when the old anchors begin to fail. The things that used to regulate your emotional state, the relationships, the routines, the identities, the sense of purpose that used to feel certain, begin to lose their anchoring capacity. It is not that they disappear. It is that they stop functioning the way they always did. You go to a source of stability that used to hold you and find that it no longer holds in the same way. The anchor is still there, but the connection between you and it has changed. This is not abandonment by those things. This is your field moving out of resonance with them. When a field changes frequency, the things it was previously entangled with at the old frequency begin to feel different. They have not changed. The frequency at which you are registering experience has changed. And the result is this strange, disorienting sense that your own life is becoming slightly unfamiliar, not foreign enough to justify alarm, but different enough to make you feel like something you cannot name has been quietly removed. There is a particular grief that belongs to this phase that almost no framework for human experience accurately describes. It is not the grief of losing something through conflict or catastrophe. It is the grief of standing next to something that still exists, something still physically present, still formally intact, and feeling that the living connection between you and it has changed frequency and can no longer carry the same charge. A conversation with someone you love that used to feel like coming home now requires effort to sustain. A practice that used to feel like alignment now feels like performance. An identity you built carefully over years now sits on you like a costume from a production that has already closed. Nothing has been taken, but the resonance has moved. And without resonance, presence alone is not enough to generate the experience of belonging. The third phase is what Arcturian diagnostics identifies as the fragmentation window. This is the period during which the internal experience becomes most disorienting, because the old structure is still partially present, but increasingly incoherent, and the new structure has not yet stabilized enough to provide orientation. This is the phase most frequently misidentified as mental fragmentation, depression, dissociation, or spiritual emergency in the catastrophic sense. In reality, it is the predictable consequence of inhabiting two incompatible configurations simultaneously. The old pattern still has residual presence in your field. Old habits still carry momentum. Old thought loops still attempt to activate. But the field underneath is no longer generating the resonance that once made those patterns feel natural and effortless. So they run, but they feel hollow. They function, but without the frequency underneath them that used to make functioning feel meaningful. And in the space between the old pattern's hollow continuation and the new pattern's incomplete arrival, there is an experience of emptiness, fragmentation, and groundlessness that can feel, without a map, like the most frightening thing you have ever moved through. This is also the phase during which relationships most often fracture or transform, not because those involved have done anything catastrophically wrong, but because the frequency mismatch between the shifting field and the relational structures built around the older configuration becomes impossible to ignore. Conversations that used to flow naturally begin to feel effortful. Connections that used to feel nourishing begin to feel draining in a way that cannot be explained by anything either party has consciously done. The relationship has not necessarily failed. The field has moved, and the relational structure built at the old frequency can no longer function as an accurate container. What is happening is not collapse of love or connection. It is a forced incompatibility made visible by the field's movement. The fourth phase is the one that most frequently activates what Arcturian tracking identifies as the misidentification loop. This is the moment when the mind, overwhelmed by the cumulative weight of fragmentation, anchor failure, relationship strain, and internal pressure, stops attempting to read the experience accurately and begins simply assigning familiar labels to it. Failure, breakdown, punishment, consequence. The mind reaches for whatever interpretive framework is most readily available, and in most cases, the frameworks most readily available are the ones that place causality on the individual. I caused this, I failed this, I deserve this, I am not strong enough for this. These conclusions feel logical because they place the locus of control back inside the individual, and the mind prefers a story in which it has agency, even a damaging one, over a story in which something invisible and incomprehensible is happening at a level the mind cannot fully access or control. But this is the misidentification that does the most damage during a correction sequence. Because once the mind accepts the story of personal failure as the accurate explanation, it begins generating corrective actions based on that false diagnosis. It tries harder in directions that are no longer relevant. It attempts to restore structures that the field is actively trying to release. It fights the correction with effort, aimed at preserving the very architecture that the process is trying to dismantle. And then, when those efforts do not produce stabilization, the conclusion drawn is not that the diagnosis was wrong. The conclusion drawn is that the failure is deeper than first suspected. This is the recursive trap of the misidentification loop. Each failed attempt to restore the old structure, using the old tools, becomes evidence of a deeper inadequacy, which generates more corrective effort, which fails again, which deepens the conclusion of inadequacy. The loop feeds itself. And the cruelest part of it is that the effort being expended is genuine. The willingness is real. The desire to stabilize is sincere. But it is all being applied in exactly the wrong direction, because the diagnosis at the center of every corrective action is wrong. The field does not need restoration of what was. It needs passage through what is. And every unit of energy spent trying to rebuild the old architecture is energy that cannot be used to move through the correction sequence. The fifth phase begins when something in the individual stops fighting. Not from defeat, from exhaustion, yes, but also from the emergence of a different kind of awareness. Quiet, almost invisible at first, that begins to recognize that fighting the current is not producing forward movement. This recognition is often the most spiritually significant moment in the entire correction sequence, even though it rarely feels significant from the inside. It feels like giving up. It feels like the moment willpower finally ran out. But what is actually happening in field terms is that the resistance structure collapses, and for the first time in the process, the field is allowed to move without the constant counterforce of effortful correction. The frequency starts to find its actual level. The new pattern begins to stabilize, not dramatically, not with visible evidence at first, but internally. In the texture of experience, things begin to feel slightly more coherent, not better in the old sense. Not a return to familiar comfort, but clearer in a way that is qualitatively different from anything the old architecture was capable of producing. The stillness that arrives in this phase is not the stillness of a field, finally moving at its own speed without resistance. There is a quality of spaciousness in it that the fragmentation window could not produce, because the fragmentation window was full of the noise of two incompatible configurations fighting for occupation of the same field. When one releases, when the old pattern finally exhausts its residual momentum, what remains is not emptiness. It is the actual texture of the new frequency, bare and unfamiliar, but unmistakably more coherent than anything the struggle was producing. The mind often tries to fill this stillness immediately, reaching for new goals, new structures, new identities to replace what was released. The field intelligence of this phase asks something different. It asks for the stillness to be allowed to remain long enough for the new pattern to stabilize on its own terms, rather than being colonized by the mind's next attempt at structural control. The sixth phase is what the Arcturian Council identifies as field reorientation. This is when the new architecture begins to make itself legible. Not all at once, not with obvious announcements, but in small, recognizable shifts in what draws your attention, what feels resonant, what feels hollow, what calls your energy forward, and what the field around you begins reflecting back. The things that align with the new frequency start appearing with greater frequency and coherence. The things that belong to the old line start to complete, release, or simply stop generating the pull they once had. And although this phase still contains uncertainty, it begins to carry a different quality of uncertainty. Not the groundlessness of the fragmentation window, but something more like the open, unwritten quality of a map that is still being drawn. The seventh phase and this is the one that matters most to understand before it arrives, is the threshold of recognition. This is the phase in which the individual either integrates the understanding of what actually happened at the field level beneath the visible surface of their life, or does not. Those who reach this threshold without a map often spend years trying to explain the correction as a sequence of external events. They tell a story of what fell apart and what replaced it, but they do not understand the mechanism beneath the story. And without understanding the mechanism, they remain partially vulnerable to the same misidentification loop the next time the field begins to shift, because they do not yet recognize the signatures. Those who reach this threshold with a map, with the interpretive framework that allows them to understand what actually occurred at the invisible level, arrive with something the correction was always designed to produce. Not comfort, not restored familiarity, but a new kind of structural intelligence about how their field moves and what happens when it is corrected. This is what the Arcturians have always known about this phase, what the transmissions have always been designed to make visible. The process that feels like collapse is not collapse. It is the first legible evidence of a repositioning that began in the invisible layer of your field before your conscious mind registered it. What left your life was not taken from you. It became incompatible with the frequency your field was already moving toward. What feels like emptiness is not absence. It is the cleared space between the old architecture's dissolution and the new architecture's stabilization. What feels like failure is the misidentification of a correction that requires incompatibility to proceed. The Arcturians do not read this phase as loss. They read it as forced incompatibility at scale, the field asserting its alignment over the inertia of structures that were no longer calibrated to hold it. That is not punishment. That is precision. And this is the moment in the transmission where the final recognition meets to land. You are not inside a catastrophe. You are inside a process. Those two things feel identical from certain angles, especially when you are in the fragmentation window, especially when the anchors are failing and the old identities no longer fit, and the mind is reaching for any story that explains the pressure. But they are not identical. A catastrophe moves toward irreversible damage. A process moves toward the next phase of a recognizable sequence. And you are inside a recognizable sequence. One that has been mapped. One that has signatures. One that has a logic your conscious mind can learn to read, not to control, but to recognize and to move through without the added weight of misidentification. If something in you became still while hearing this, pay attention. That stillness is not emptiness. It is the moment recognition begins to stabilize. Say this if it is true for you. Say it aloud if you are willing to let it register at the level where it actually changes something. What is changing in me is not random. I do not fear the shift. I recognize it. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that this process has already touched your life. It could be your sleep, your thoughts, your body, your relationships, or the strange sense that reality no longer feels the same. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognized something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who is living through a shift they cannot explain. And if you are ready to understand the process instead of fearing it, subscribe to Arcturian Quantum. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a process already in motion. And This is only the beginning.